My guest Al Kooper has a new double CD called Rare and Well Done that collects his greatest and most obscure recordings from 1964 to 2001. Kooper played in the Blues Project, then co-founded Blood, Sweat and Tears, and wrote most of their early songs. He played on Dylan's albums Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 Revisited, and played the famous organ line on Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone. Kooper also played on recordings by the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, and George Harrison, and produced records by Lynyrd Skynyrd, Nils Lofgren, and Rick Nelson. One of the previously unreleased tracks on his new CD is his 1964 demo of his song Something Goin' On, which he wrote for Blood, Sweat and Tears.
You know, I woke up this morning. The first thing I did was to look into your eyes. And in that space where I used to find so much truthfulness.
Al Kooper started his career when he was still a teenager. At the age of 13, he became the guitar player in the Royal Teens after they had their hit Short Shorts. And through his new connections, he started writing songs for pop performers, working out of one of the New York buildings on Broadway that headquartered many of the pop writers of the 50s and early 60s. I spoke to Al Kooper in 1998, after he revised and expanded his memoir Backstage Passes. Your big pop success as a songwriter was This Diamond Ring, which was recorded by Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Gary being Jerry Lewis's son. And you say in your memoir that you wrote that song with an R&B group like the Drifters in mind. So how did it end up being performed by Gary Lewis instead of the Drifters?
Boy, it beats the hell out of me. I was amazed. My publisher at the time, Aaron Schroeder, saw me in the hallway and he said, well, we got a record on that Drifter song you wrote. I said, oh, the Drifters cut it? He said, no. Snuff Garrett cut it. Snuff Garrett was a West Coast producer known for producing Bobby V and people like that. And I said, since when is Snuff Garrett cutting R&B records? He said, well, he's not. I said, oh, dear. He said, well, I have the record. Do you want to come upstairs and hear it? I said, well, just out of curiosity, I'd like to hear what Snuff Garrett did with This Diamond Ring. And so I went upstairs and he played the record, and I was just heartsick. I thought it was terrible. I admonished him after he played the record and said, I don't even waste my time playing me things like this again. That's the worst thing I ever heard.
Of course, it became a huge hit.
Yeah, 2 months later, it was #1 in the country. And I say, hey, I wrote that song.
Now, what do you think about the arrangement now?
Oh, I still hate it. I still think it's an insipid, horrible record. And as a matter of fact, I went in later years and at much expense to my credibility, recorded the song on one of my solo albums to show people where it came from and what it was like, because I actually think it's a good song. I just couldn't stand the Gary Lewis interpretation.
Okay, we're going to hear both of those versions back to back. We're going to hear the Gary Lewis version and then the version that you cut with the arrangement that you originally had in mind, the version you cut in the 1970s. So here we go.
It's even funnier if you play it the other way around. If you play mine first and then play Gary Lewis's, which is, the way I saw it, it's even funnier that way.
I'm willing to give that a shot. Is our engineer ready to do that? Our engineer's ready to do that? Let's go. So this is Al Kooper, followed by Gary Lewis's version of Al Kooper's song, This Diamond Ring.
No. This diamond ring don't shine for me anymore. And this diamond ring don't mean what it did before. So
this diamond ring doesn't shine for me anymore. And this diamond ring doesn't mean what it did before.
Okay, Al Kooper, guess what? I like the Gary Lewis version. I'm not saying I don't like yours, but I like the Gary Lewis version. I think it's a fun pop hit.
Well, so did many millions of people.
Is the interview over now?
It's a sad thing.
No, but it's pop. I mean, it's it's got a...
It's happy. You can do the math to it. It's,
You don't like that kind of like kettle drum or whatever is on there?
Timpani, no,
Timpani,
it's great, and certain things. It was great in the 1812 overture.
So what did the Gary Lewis version do for your career? Did it help it a lot?
Yeah, it helped it tremendously as a songwriter. Right after that, we had another a top 20 record by Gene Pitney called "I Must Be Seeing Things," and
Want to sing a few
a lot
bars
of
of that to refresh our memory?
well, I'll recite the opening lyrics. I used to write the music, and I wrote with two other guys, and they wrote the words, as I was sort of lyrically deficient at the time, and actually lyrically challenged at the time, and. This one, typical of its time, said, "Isn't that my girl? And is that my best friend? Aren't they walking much too close together? And it don't look like they're talking about the weather." And then it goes, "Hey, I must be seeing things. This can't be." Like that. That was typical of those songs we wrote at that time.
Well, in the 1960s, you met Bob Dylan through Dylan's record producer of the time, Tom Wilson, and this was in what year? About
1965.
65. And Tom Wilson had just cut Dylan's first electric single, Subterranean Homesick Blues, and he invited you to watch Dylan at a session, and you were determined, you say, to do more than watch. You wanted to actually play on it. The session turned out to be the session for Highway 61 Revisited, in which Like a Rolling Stone was recorded, and you played Hammond B3 on Like a Rolling Stone. How did you get to play on it?
Well, I was just determined to play. I was a guitar player at the time, and I stayed up all night practicing, and had actually an inflated opinion of my ability as a guitar player. And I got to the session, and at the time I was playing guitar on records as a session musician, so the other musicians that were there early when I got there did not think it was unusual for me to be there with my guitar, because I'd played sessions with them, and they knew that I did session work. And I set up my stuff, and I sat down, and I waited, and Dylan came in with a guitar player who was roughly my age, and he sat down and started warming up, and I realized I was in way over my head. He was the best guitar player I'd ever heard in my life, just warming up. Just the things he was playing were way beyond my grasp as a player, and I said to myself, I got to get out of here before I really embarrass myself. So when there was a moment, I took my guitar and put it in the case and put it against the wall, and I went in the control room where I belonged and watched the session. And Tom Wilson came in, and he hadn't seen me sitting out there with the guitar, so that was very good. And then during the session, they had someone playing the organ, and they moved him over to piano. Actually, his name was Paul Griffin. He was a studio keyboard player. And I walked over to Tom Wilson, and I said, "Hey, why don't you let me play organ on this? I got a great part for this." He went, "Oh, man, you're not a organ player. You're a guitar player. You don't play the organ." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I got a great part for this, Tom." And just at that point, they called him for a phone call. And I thought to myself, well, he didn't say no. He just said I wasn't an organ player. And so I went out and sat down at the organ. And as a matter of fact, if Paul Griffin hadn't have left the organ switched on, that would have been the end of my career, because it's very complicated to turn on a Hammond B3 organ. It takes about 3 separate moves, and you have to know what you're doing. And I didn't. But it was on already, so I was saved. And then Tom Wilson came back out, and he said, "Okay, this is take 6." And then he saw me, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing out there?" And I just started laughing. And he was a gentleman. He just said, okay, let's go. We're rolling. This is take 7. I guess he thought, if I wanted to do this so bad, he would stand behind it, because he was my friend.
When you had told Tom Wilson that you had a part worked out in your head, did you really?
No, of course not. 90% ambition.
Okay, so then what happened? They started performing the song.
Well, they were rehearsing for a second, and I kind of got the thing. And the speaker to the organ was very far from where I was sitting at the organ, and it was covered by baffling, so that it wouldn't leak into other microphones that were on in the studio, and so I couldn't actually hear what I was playing. And if I put the headphones on, I could kind of hear a little bit of it, but hear the other things that were much louder, like the guitar. And I didn't have any music to read. I had to do it by ear, which I was used to doing because of playing on sessions as a guitar player. And I just kind of, muddled my way through it, and it was the only complete take of the day. So they went in to play it back and listen to it. And during the playback, Dylan went over to Tom Wilson and said, "Hey, turn the organ up." And he said, "Oh man, that guy's not an organ player." He says, "I don't care, turn the organ up." And that's how I became an organ player.
Well, let's hear Like a Rolling Stone with my guest Al Kooper featured on organ. Okay, that was a song.
Don't tell me what it was, because I'm going to tell you what it was.
Oh, good. Okay, go ahead.
That was Mouse in the Traps with A Public Execution.
Correct, and it's one of the records on that great anthology Nuggets. A little woolly bully action in there too, I think.
Well, yeah, it is by the way a very cheesy organ, probably a Farfisa. And yeah, that was one of the records that we laughed at back then.
So you played that for Dylan when it came out?
Well, as we both used to listen to them, it wasn't, we'd like, I'd go to the record store and then we'd go back to his house and we'd put all these records on and just sit there and laugh.
Now, the record that you first made with Dylan got you started in a longer relationship with him, playing with him, and you played with him at the Newport Festival, his first, like electric concert, and it's a concert that's famous because Dylan got booed. And in your memoir, you kind of have a different interpretation of why he was getting booed. The standard interpretation is because he had electric instruments, the audience was really angry and thought that he'd sold out, etc., and they were booing him. What's your explanation?
Well, many people came to that festival, which was a 3-day festival, like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, to see Dylan because he was like the king of folk music at the time, and he was the headliner of the festival and was playing the final set on Sunday night. And so primarily a college-age crowd came, and they sat through many musics over the 3-day period under the umbrella of folk music that I'm sure that they didn't care for. And most people played 45-minute to an hour sets, and then we came out and we played for 15 minutes, 3 electric songs. And I think that the people were horrified and incensed that we only played for 15 minutes.
But weren't they booing during the performance too, though?
No.
No?
You find me some oral record of that, and I'll be very surprised. There was an undercurrent of the festival directors that were very upset with Dylan playing electric. That is a fact, and that is true. But that really had no way of making itself known to the audience that was attending the thing, other than through the press later on after the festival was over, which is how that myth came to be promulgated. After the festival, that's what the press wrote about, because they were privy to the fact that Pete Seeger and Alan Lomax were very upset with the electrification that Dylan was doing. And in fact, there were other acts that played electric at that festival that nobody got bent out of shape about, like the Chambers Brothers and the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And they didn't get booed because they played electric.
I asked him about the sound he wanted.
Well, I had written a group of songs that, to me, sounded like they would sound best with horns in them. And I brought that idea to the Blues Project, and they said that they didn't want to add horns. So basically I left the band and went to put together a band that would have horns and that I could perform these songs with.
Why'd you want the horns so much?
The songs just kind of dictated that they have horns in them. I don't know what it was. It was, sort of magic in a way.
Is there a song you want to play that captures the way you wanted to use horns?
I would say probably I Can't Quit Her or I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know. Either one of those.
Okay.
Or My Days Are Numbered.
Why don't we hear "I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know," and we'll start this a little deep into it, where the horns start to become prominent. This is Blood, Sweat, and Tears. My guest is Al Kooper.
When I wasn't making too much money, you know where my paycheck went. You know I brought it home to baby, and I never spent one red cent.
Al Kooper, had you worked with horns like this before?
There was a period in my life where I wrote ghost arrangements, and I wrote for horns in that situation. But I had not really been in a band with a horn section. No, I had admired Maynard Ferguson's jazz group, which had a large horn section, and that was sort of my model for Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
You know, you write in your book that aging in pop business is always held against you. That, you know, if you're older, you're seen as not being cutting edge anymore, and, you know, therefore washed up.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate portrayal of the music business.
Mm-hmm.
Except maybe, you know, in the blues area where they respect seniority.
That's true. That is really true. Yeah, it's true in some rock and roll too. Like, you know, I mean, the Rolling Stones can get as old as whatever.
Oh yeah, no, there are exceptions to the rule, and there are people that are really fortunate enough to keep going, but there are many that don't. And the other thing is that, you know, take a person like Bob Dylan or Sly and the Family Stone. These are people that made incredible music, and yet the society is geared up and insists that they must continue doing that for the rest of their lives, or they're horrible people, or they're washed up, they're through. But I mean, if you look at the body of work that Sly and the Family Stone left us, it doesn't matter if he writes another song again. He changed music forever and was an incredibly strong influence on the way music is being played today in the R&B field. Everyone owes a debt to him. And yet, you know, people go, he's through, he's a drug casualty. He is none of those things. He is a strong influence in the history of music.
Al Kooper, I really appreciate your talking with us, and I want to thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
Al Kooper recorded in 1998. He has a new double CD called Rare and Well Done, the greatest and most obscure recordings, 1964 to 2001. Fresh Air's executive producer is Danny Miller. Our engineer is Bob Purdick. Our interviews and reviews are produced and edited by Amy Salet, Phyllis Myers, Naomi Person, Monique Nazareth, Anne-Marie Baldonado, Megan Howell, Patty Leswing, and Jessica Chu. Sue Spolin directed the show. I'm Terry Gross.